Welcome guys, gals and non-binary pals to this week's episode of Buffy Boys, your weekly review of Buffy the Vampire Slayer from a queer, literary and feminist perspective. My name is Joel. I'm one of your hosts, and with me as always is the other 11th host,
Brian. Hi.
As in having the quality of bread which I've just made. I've made a sourdough loaf and I'm very happy with myself.
Yeah, we the oven might be running in the background. You might hear a little bit of a fan going.
It is bread. I made it. It's bread and it can be eaten.
Yeah, it's a sourdough starter because, you know, that's what everyone's doing 6 months ago or whatever.
Finger on the pulse of those trends over here.
Exactly. Joel insisted on waiting until we had the perfect jar to put the starter into, and then insisted on having the perfect flour when you can just use any old flour for it. But that's okay.
Now she tells me.
Huh?
Now she tells me.
Who's
Don't
she?
like call you she.
Yeah.
That's a weird one.
I don't think we're those people.
I'm really not. It doesn't suit me.
No. So yeah, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Let me give you a quick Buffy Ann summary. So this episode is called Out of My Mind. Some pages just fell out of my book.
Are you sure?
It was directed by David Grossman, who last directed Real Me, and it was written by Rebecca Kirshner. I've written down Rebecca David Kirshner because I obviously just saw the word David above where I'd written that and wrote that again. Anyway, so she hasn't written for Buffy before. She writes about 8 episodes in total, including Tabula Rasa, which is a pretty good one, in season 5? Season 6? Season 6.
Season 6, yeah. Tabula Rasa is one of those episode titles which, like the Star Trek episode called Tabula Rasa, the thing X-Files, I think it's a Stargate one. Yeah, it's one of those ones that shared across franchises. They're
all just really big fans of the philosopher whose name I cannot remember now. What's his name? Oh, shit. He's one of the like French 18th century people, or maybe 17th century. I'll come back to it later. Starts with an L. Starts with an L. Anyway, but she also wrote for Freaks and Geeks, which is fun. She was the showrunner for the 2008 or 2007 or so reboot of Beverly Hills 90210 called 90210. She was the showrunner for seasons 2 and 3. And she's a descendant of Rebecca Nurse, who was executed as a witch in Salem.
Well, you really went deep on this woman's backstory.
Wikipedia was just
very forthcoming.
Yeah, I'd say she wrote it herself. Joel, what would you like to talk about for the Bronze Panther today?
Brian, can I double check with you, just a professional no podcaster, in your Buffy Ann summary, did you summarize the episode?
No, I didn't. Okay, so Out of My Mind. Harmony takes refuge with Spike. Joyce is taken ill, momentarily not recognizing Dawn. Riley's heart is under strain from Maggie Walsh's enhancements. Spike and Harmony kidnap Riley's military surgeon to remove Spike's chip. He plays along. Buffy rescues him and he operates on on Riley. Spike wakes from an erotic dream, realizing he loves Buffy.
As you do.
Yeah,
I think we've all been there as Buffy fans one time or another.
Waking up and realizing I love Buffy.
Yeah.
So true.
So yes, I think we were fishing around for something to talk about for this week's Bronze Banter, which wasn't just us continuing to watch anime.
We did finish the Cowboy Bebop TV series and movie recently.
I will touch briefly on the movie and say it is probably the best film I've ever seen, which was like a sequel to a television show.
Even better than Serenity. Oh wait, Serenity ripped this off.
Yeah, there's a lot of Cowboy Bebop beat for beat, theme for theme in Serenity. It has its own Joss Whedon stuff in it, absolutely, but I did notice like quite a lot of similarities. Even in the film, like there's a character that's quite like the operative in the Serenity film and so on and so forth. But it was very good, it was very stylish, and I think it kind of stands by itself as a sci-fi noir film as well. So really enjoyed that. But I think the other meaty thing we've been working through in terms of being hot on the trend of pop culture is Amazon Prime's anti-hero, anti-superhero TV show, The Boys.
Based on a comic book by someone, right?
Yeah, so The Boys is based on a relatively long-running and I think objective to say highly controversial comic book series by Garth Ennis, whose other prominent series was being Preacher, which was also quite adult and controversial, and was made into a series on AMC, I think, which we watched 2 episodes of.
We watched like 4 episodes, I think. Okay. We didn't love it.
He did a run, if we remember correctly, was one of the well-regarded runs in Hellblazer, the John Constantine comics I mentioned before. It's kind of considered a good era.
Do you know where he's from?
I don't. Is he? Oh,
he's Northern Irish.
Oh, very good.
Yep.
Very good. The Boys. Tell us about The Boys. How do we sum up The Boys?
Yeah, it's a weird one. So you're quite reluctant to watch any of it. I think you were concerned it was like very vicious and very.
Yeah. So basically the basic premise being that it's a world where superheroes are real, as if we're in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but the heroes are corporately sponsored and also star in their own films and so on and so forth. And that they're actually all pretty much to a person terrible people, murderers, rapists, selfish, shallow people, etc., etc. And Carl Urban, who plays Bones McCoy in the recent Star Trek reboot films, and also Judge Dredd and Doom. I'm trying to think if there's anything more famous than that. Like Star Trek has to be the most famous thing. He's probably
yeah.
done.
I think it must be.
And who I always thought was also a country and western singer, but that's Keith Urban.
Oh God, I'm not sure.
I think so. Anyway, I got them confused. So Carl Urban's character Billy Butcher leads an anti-superhero kind of vigilante justice endeavor, and that's kind of the pitch of it. So my reluctance about it is that Garth Ennis's comics are incredibly extreme insofar as very graphic sexual content, very graphic violence, but also quite what I would characterize perhaps pejoratively as quite teenage boy, in that it's quite puerile to a certain degree. At times it can be absurdistly extreme, but it's just like there's one of the characters in the comic books whose nickname is the homo hero and stuff. Yeah. Sure. So it's very, very, very broad strokes, and kind of perhaps in my interpretation, this kind of stuff is kind of language, like kind of enjoying a certain kind of adolescent cruelty, which is not necessarily enjoyable to watch. I think say something like Kick-Ass, that film Kick-Ass was similar in kind of that kind of tone. But I will say that in terms of having watched the show, I think it deviates from that to a large degree. I think it's a very, very tempered adaptation and quite stylish in many ways.
Yeah, and the acting throughout is pretty good, and the characterization of the different characters is actually quite it's quite fleshed out, as in like just nicely. Every character feels quite distinct and very well established quite early on. We're only on season 1. Season 2 came out, or is coming out. No, I think it is coming out this Friday. And season 1 aired about a year ago. It's definitely not an unreserved recommendation. It's something that we would say if you're, someone who...
My dad loves it. My dad recommended this to me a couple of times.
Okay. Yeah. Things are starting to make a lot more sense. If you're someone who really likes gritty hero or superhero stuff, like everyone in the fucking world, you probably like this as well. I'm kind of intrigued by the new Batman. The Batman. The Robert Pattinson. I quite like. Version. I mean,
I like him a lot.
I think it's such a like a small brain take to be like, Robert Pattinson's good actually, because those clips of him being interviewed about Twilight and him hating Twilight made the rounds for years, and he's constantly done really indie stuff over the last couple of years, and a lot of it's been very good. Most recent being the
Lighthouse, which we weren't completely sold on, as we wouldn't necessarily buy the Blu-ray of it. But it was an incredibly well made film.
Which to distinguish, we tend to buy Blu-rays specifically of horror movies that we really like, because we just watch them so many times. We really do revisit horror movies, specifically more so than others.
Yeah. So what's the Lighthouse-esque film that we?
Oh, esque, or do you mean what he also directed?
No, there was some film adjacent to it that I think we saw that we were very keen on, that we did buy the Blu-ray for.
Oh, Midsommar.
Midsommar, it will be an example of something we were like, we'll pick that up.
We need to pick up on Blu-ray is Parasite.
Yes, absolutely. Big letdown still that there were actually no parasites in the film. Really took me...
It's making me think of, there are no parasites in your Parasite movie. Oh, it's Jurassic Park. I should really just presume that like whenever I'm reaching for a reference or reaching for anything in my life, the answer is probably Jurassic Park, because I know that movie literally, not just line for line, but for like sound effect to sound effect and moment to moment.
You are a tremendous Jurassic Park stan. It's true.
Like, I mean, I don't know any of the characters' names necessarily.
Well,
but as in
T-Rex. So that's one.
I definitely don't know the name of. Oh, Ellie. No, I do. Her name's Ellie, but I was going to say I don't know the name of Laura Dern's character in it.
I think you think Laura Dern is in Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
On one of her own adventures.
I basically see Laura Dern in movies as being Laura Dern.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Oh, there's a recommendation actually that I can say unreservedly is Enlightened. Or Enlightenment. I can't remember. But it's a HBO TV series from around 2010. I want to say 2009 maybe. And it's just about one woman who's very angry and trying not to be very angry anymore. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like insipid. It seems insipid to start, and it's actually just a very brilliant, very deep character study. Mm-hmm. And Laura Dern is the main character. She's incredible. And the first episode is a scene that I've never watched without crying, where there's a turtle and it's supposed to signify her trying to be happy. Mm-hmm. And Human of the Year by Regina Spektor plays during it, which is a really incredible song.
She's underused in Regina Spektor as a kind of soundtrack. Is underused in things which aren't overly sentimental, if you know what I mean.
True, but the other big example of, I think, that comes to mind of Regina Spektor song in media would be the song Us in 500 Days of Summer, mm-hmm. which we and everyone else remembers as a movie that's overly sentimental and kind of sappy and kind of gross. But upon revisiting, of course, you have to acknowledge that like the 500 Days of Summer is a comment on that kind of expression and that kind of approach to things. The main character, whatever his name is, Tom, in 500 Days of Summer, is just wrong. And the text shows him to be wrong constantly. And Zooey Deschanel's character responds to him in a way that's totally reasonable for someone who just doesn't want to go out with you, dude. It's
a Starship Troopers of rom-coms, I think.
It kind of is, yeah.
But just to circle back and finish a point, as this was all relevant to the Batman you're excited about with Robert Pattinson. And I will absolutely agree with the sentiment that, do we need to see a Batman film again? Is this something which is needed artistically? No, not necessarily. Batman has been done perfectly twice. Like Michael Keaton's films are a fantastic representation of the comic books. I think they're underserved now by a slightly disaffected generation in terms of these kind of films, but looking back, like, comic books were meant to be these kind of height and campy gothic things, and it does that really well. And the Christian Bale films are
specifically that, but Dark Knight, obviously
Dark Knight is a tremendous, like one of the few films actually earns the idea of kind of recreating something with more verisimilitude without necessarily being grim, dark, and gritty and all that.
It's funny. There's been such a rise over the last I was listening to someone talk about this on YouTube recently, but there's been such a rise in people being like, "Oh, Batman Begins is actually better than Dark Knight," and it's so true. People are like, "Oh, actually, my favorite is Batman Begins, not the Dark Knight, because the Dark Knight's actually just like is overrated and stuff." It's like, shut the fuck up. The Dark Knight's like, it's a masterpiece.
Yeah, it's
except for that big chunk in the middle, where nothing happens, but whatever.
Yeah, but I always say this, just because something is, which is a completely wankery thing to say, but just because something's perfect doesn't mean it's without flaws. Yeah,
true.
But yeah, and I think there's so many other things you could do with Batman. You could put him in 1920s and make him a private detective. Just do something weird. Any of the various things.
Put him in the future, like Batman Beyond.
Batman Beyond. Do one of the if you have to do Batman, as opposed to the thousands of other heroes, at least do some variant on them that's just not an origin story or close to it or close to the various rogues gallery we know. That being said, they won't stop doing this.
This looks pretty interesting.
I would rather watch this Robert Pattinson thing and Zendaya and all that than I would, what's his fucking name, Ben Affleck.
Is Zendaya actually in it, or are we just presuming? Because Zendaya is in everything. I'm thankful for her being in everything. She's deeply beautiful. She's a wonderful actor. I think she's actually brings a lot of like depth and like tenderness to a lot of her roles, and she's incredibly stunningly beautiful. She's in Dune, I know that for sure.
Sorry, we did mention Zendaya because she's in Dune. I'm actually thinking of Zoe Kravitz, who plays Catwoman.
Yeah.
which makes more sense.
Great. Okay.
We're going to have to talk about when Dune comes out, actually.
Oh, that's going to be great.
Yeah. But speaking of
Dune podcast.
Speaking of catty women, in this episode of Buffy, we see Harmony returns.
Yeah. That's pretty great. I liked Harmony moving back.
So yeah, this is quite a again, kind of on this season 5 graft of kind of developing the interpersonal stories. This episode sets up a lot of dominoes which will get knocked over later in the season. So that's kind of really what it's about, is kind of pushing those relationships on at different paces. So we see throughout the episode, we see Buffy and Riley's relationship ostensibly kind of solidify, but really I think strains. We see Spike, I think, to a large degree, give up on the idea of trying to remove his chip in this episode, because
this is the last episode where he's a threat.
Yeah.
Except for in season 7, which is a different case altogether.
Different kettle of fish. And introducing this thread of him being interested in Buffy, which I think we'll have a lot to say about. We also see Joyce's brain is getting too big for her skull, and she gets sick, and it's the start of her descent. And furthering this kind of thing, if for that moment when her brain goes bad, she doesn't recognize Dawn. And in the course of going to hospital, we're introduced
to Ben.
Yeah, from very left of stage to Ben, who
definitely gets too much characterization for someone who's like, I mean, I'm sure if you were watching this week, I'm sure the Buffy boards are like, sorry, what?
Yeah, that was this guy. Yeah.
And why did he get so much of like, why was the camera pointed at him so much?
Yeah. And like, I don't like Ben. He's rude. He's not an enjoyable person to watch. But I think ostensibly you could say this is the first appearance of Glory in the season.
I can't remember if we actually had this conversation off mic or not.
We don't talk about Buffy. We're not on the podcast.
True that. But I think we were talking about whether or not Ben is actually Glory at this point, or because we were talking about Dawn, and we were talking about like, you know, is that when Glory arrives on Earth is when Dawn kind of gets injected in the middle of season 5 episode 1, and actually no, so Glory is attached to Ben, and she was born into his body,
birth,
and but she only kind of starts to take over as he gets older, basically. Yeah,
which would make sense, because otherwise you could have her morphing and have a baby or whatever.
Yeah, bizarre stuff.
So there's definitely an esoteric or an existentialist argument to be made about whether this is Glory or not, but I think for narrative purposes this is like the first appearance of the big bad, given that if we can kill Glory by killing Bang, I think when Bang appears it's Glory. Do you?
Agreed. Can you kill Glory by killing Ben? No, that's not the thing.
That's how she dies.
Is that how she dies in the end?
That's the whole point of why Giles kills him, is that she dies. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, I think this episode is quite interesting because it is an example of what we've been talking about a lot, which is the kind of the season 5, not problem, but the season 5 state, which is moving things along and not really having a very clear purpose to your episode. So we saw that kind of beginning in season 4, where you had fewer episodes which were just moving the plot, which were kind of like distinct contained episode, and more episodes which were kind of moving the plot along with the stuff around the initiative. This episode I think is kind of similar to that, the A plot being, of course, but they're kind of like dual A plots, which is the Spike Harmony trying to get the chip out, and then the Riley Buffy trying to get the heart out, and those kind of converging.
It's not really explaining what they do to readjust his hyperadrenal glands, you know.
Yeah, and while he had been like, you know, the doctor had says in the episode, he should have been here yesterday. That would have been a good time to make sure that he didn't die. I can't guarantee anything now. And they did the operations absolutely fine. And one of the weird things about this episode being, Giles, Xander, and Anya are not in this episode. Effectively, they're in one scene where they're building a shelf in the magic box, yeeted into the stratosphere after that. The doctor from the initiative, Dr. Oppenheimer, or whatever, whatever expatriated Nazi name they gave him, got a huge amount of characterization and like a personality, and it's probably has to be one of the top 5 most like fleshed out initiative characters, which is really strange. He's more fleshed out than the general who dies in season
He does.
4?
I think he gets eaten by It actually looks like a scene out of Cabin in the Woods. Like some Mothman comes in and chews on it.
Oh, I'd like to watch that again soon, actually. Anyway.
Yeah.
So he's definitely one of the more fleshed out characters there. So yeah, it's an odd episode. I think the first thing we have to ask is whose mind? Out of my mind. So most immediately, Joyce. She seems to go out of her mind for a second. It introduces the idea of insanity and as a plot point in terms of being able to identify Dawn as a key, and then that also being an indication of Glory's presence is that kind of the mind sucking, etc. However, I think we'll have to look at it further.
Threw you off there.
Yeah, you really did. So what else you have to look at there is Riley is very clearly out of his mind during the episode. He goes from being like, jacked up and jacked in while he's like, playing basketball. Apparently, Mark Lucas played basketball professionally in England. So,
What?
Yeah.
That is a random data point.
That's why there's the scene where he's playing basketball, looking the palest anyone's ever looked on TV.
Yeah.
But he's...
Very Tom Hardy and Venom kind of pallor.
He really does have that. He is playing basketball. And yeah, so he's going out hunting by himself or while patrolling. And as it turns out, his heart is about to give out because of the operation or the experimentation that was done to him in the initiative. And he's refusing to engage with this fact. Apparently, the initiative have been pursuing him for weeks, trying to tell him to like not die. Basically,
yeah. I feel like that the more time Riley has to actually be Buffy's boyfriend, the more I'm like, you're not really great at this because it's like. If the military, through Graham, his good friend Graham Cracker, are coming off as actually trying to help him, we've been trying to get in touch with him, and he just will not respond to us, and he nearly died, and he didn't tell Buffy any of this. All of that is terrible, really unnecessary.
It's not great. Riley's definitely out of his mind. He has the heart problem he's having is kind of a very clear metaphor there, where he's aware that Buffy's not in love with him, and he's heartbroken, so his heart's not working properly. Additionally, he's just kind of lost his perspective when it comes to the Buffy stuff, because he thinks that if he maintains that kind of super strength and whatever they've done to him that's not really working, he will maintain Buffy's interest. He suggests a few times that like she wants to be going out with a superhero, or her ex-boyfriend was like a vampire, and you're saying previously it's contrasts nicely by the fact that Angel thought that Buffy should have a normcore boyfriend, basically. So and then the other person who's out of their mind is Spike. So he wants the chip out of his mind, literally wants it to be taken out, and he's being driven insane by Buffy's presence and
but Buffy's incredible harassment of just being alive.
And so he wants to make her neck into his chalice.
He did say that.
Anyway, so
he also drinks his own nose blood in this episode.
Yeah, he does.
Kind of gross.
I mean, who would ever taste their own blood? So then he also, by the end of the episode, it's very clear that he is deeply obsessed with Buffy and in love with her. So that's great. That's all I think the references in the title. One of the things that we have to look at with every episode of Buffy is that every episode of Buffy, to some degree, reflects on Buffy. So how do you feel like this episode reflects on Buffy as a character herself? Yeah,
I suppose it's kind of a facet of Buffy trying to find her place in the middle of a lot of these different relationships, because she's best and most honed where she's a clear goal that she's moving towards, and I think she actually has stuff that's quite compelling for her. She's apparently studying very hard for her course in college.
Yeah, that was a really cute scene, I thought.
Yeah, where her and Willow are debating about French Revolution, was it?
Mm-hmm.
And they build a training room for her in the magic box so she can get more Slayers, and she's actually really touched by that. I think that's like her leaning into her profession and being, you know, feeling like Riley's bothering her at work. All of that is really good for her, but all these other aspects of having to deal with Spike, having to deal with her mother and Riley, she's not really interested in a lot of that. You know, it's she I think she feels a lot of obligation. And I think this is from in terms of reflection on Buffy, is showing that she's being split and pulled in far too many directions here to be effective, which is why some of that starts to fall away over time.
By the way, I forgot to say, episode was first aired on October 17th, 2000. Definitely. So Buffy is definitely being overloaded. She, I think to some degree, the problem that Buffy's presented with in season 5 is in some ways being directionless, and in some ways having to establish a personality and a selfhood and a structure outside of her Slayerness, you know, and the kind of like ending in the kind of death is your gift stuff of being able to give of yourself in a way that's beyond what is kind of like what is the Slayer, you know?
What is the Slayer?
What is the Slayer? But yeah, it's an interesting episode in some ways. In other ways, it's not very interesting at all.
Yeah, but I also think it would like defend against a straw man, but defend Dawn in this episode because she solves the two central problems of this episode. She is the one who idly, while playing with Ben's stethoscope, noticed that Riley's heart is about to explode, and we don't see the scene, but transitions from them being there for Joyce to him having, you know, submitted to a tachyogram with a doctor, you know. And she also makes the suggestion, idly but effectively, that if they want the military's house, she should just go to Riley's apartment and say incriminating things into his phone.
If they're constantly spying you anyway, why not just say it? Yeah,
and both of those things were like essential to the episode. So I don't know. She didn't get enough credit here. No, say thank you, Dawn.
No, never says thank you, Dawn.
She's still dressed like a little church lady, though.
Yeah, this episode still has baby Dawn face on it. Like the scene in this episode where she is getting the toys out of the cereal. That was fun. It was not a 15-year-old thing to do. Yeah,
I also don't think that her in the hospital with the stethoscope and
that kind of like the lack of social awareness and like, you know, lack of teenage awkwardness there.
Yeah, but also the fact that they just let her use a stethoscope on the three of them in the middle of their conversation. It's the kind of way you kind of slightly like edit out a small child's behavior around you. It's like, yeah, just do whatever you want, as opposed to like a near adult or mid teenager who's like, I'm going to interrupt your conversation to listen to your heart. It's just, it just doesn't read well. Yeah,
no, you're definitely right.
I did think that scene where she had pouring out 7 bowls of cereal to get the toy and then was like, I want eggs. It was actually quite funny.
Yeah, I'm sure you identified with that quite heavily
because I like eggs.
You love eggs.
I do love eggs.
Why did you say that so questioningly then? You're like, I like eggs.
I was just wondering what particular insult you were leveling at me. So something else happens in this episode in terms of transitional stuff is we have Willow and Tara are exploring the Sunnydale High School, which makes his last appearance, RIP. And we get the first proper inclination of Willow using magic where it's not strictly necessary, and Tara being perturbed by this, which is going to lay the foundations. I have to say as well, I wanted to say this next time Tara came up. In the interim, since the last episode, I listened to an episode of a podcast I may have recommended before, Switchblade Sisters.
I don't think you have mentioned it on the podcast, but yeah, go
on. So essentially it's women interviewing women who work in film about their favourite genre films. It's incredibly compelling and very well researched.
Mostly horror, right?
This would be any kind of thing. There was Drive. There was Star Trek: The Next Generation. So, you know, it's often horror by its nature, but it could be Gremlins. It could be anything.
Gremlins is a horror movie.
Okay, well, E.T.
E.T. is a horror movie.
Okay, well, everything's a horror movie. You try hard enough. And the episode I listened to was with Amber Benson, who plays Tara. Who recommended a film called The Night of the Comet, which I'm excited to watch because apparently it's a template for the or inspiration for Buffy Summer specifically, in terms of like a woman who is combating the supernatural menace, who isn't a final girl strictly. She's just the hunter as such. I
listened to it on your recommendation, and it was really interesting. There was one scene where she's talking to her friend, and she's saying they're talking about how the world is going to end and that's crap because they've been looking forward to going to the mall and they just want to have a normal, enjoyable life. And apparently, specifically, lots of people remember that scene. The writer presumed that people are going to just find that absolutely ridiculous, and they were planning on cutting and everything. But it's very much the template for that kind of I'm 16, I don't want to die.
Yeah, the world is definitely doomed. Yeah, that kind of thing. And Amber Benson herself, because naturally, she's probably one of the things she's most well known for is Tara, and Tara's quite like a dreamy character. Amber Benson had tremendous energy and was very compelling and very genuine, and I instantly took a massive liking to her in that interview. So I'm now just excited to watch the Tara stuff. And one anecdote from Buffy she shared was that later in season 5, when she's brained out, she just wasn't eager to do anything in a lot of scenes. She was sat there being kind of like mute or whatever, and potentially in pajamas. So she would just turn up the set and fall asleep on a couch while Giles would be arguing with Buffy about stuff, which I thought was quite funny.
Quite nice, yeah. Okay, so so what did you make of the Spike Harmony stuff in this episode?
I have time for Harmony. I think they do a nice bargain basement Bonnie and Clyde thing. And I think Spike, it's funny. Spike is a very modular character because you move him around the set and the setting depending on what kind of behavior you want him to have. If you want him to be brooding and kind of basically monologuing or dialoguing with himself, and not really doing much, you put him in a crypt by himself talking to a mannequin. You bring Harmony in when you want him to be catalyzed into actually action or irritated or have his plans specifically interfered with. I think she's quite good for that. So I enjoy it. I don't know if it's a very Moorish relationship. It's certainly not Spike and Drusilla, which was like a very potent kind of thing that was going on.
I was thinking that Harmony's sire is Spike, but it's not. It's just she's just got bit at the Ascension. Yeah,
I'm not sure if we may have seen that.
We did. We actually saw her getting downed, if you get me, in the same way that we saw Larry getting whacked with the...
Yeah. So yeah, that was just a random vamp. And I think that this is at least the 4th time in the show that Spike has been giving his evil monologue, and he has been embarrassed by the camera. In this case, he fell into an open grave. So it's relentless. The only person who's ever gotten the evil monologue has been Angel in Passion.
True. Yeah. No, you're right.
I'm jealous.
But no, Mercedes McNabb is such a star. She's so enjoyable to watch. The plot of Harmony being convinced that Buffy is out to get her and hunting her, and that she's
she's found me.
Yeah, she's found me, and running into a grave while Buffy's in the house. And when she comes out, she's like, well, what did she say about me? It's all very it's really well presented. Who did Mercedes McNabb audition for again? Was it Buffy? Or no,
I think it was Cordelia.
Charisma Carpenter auditioned for... Oh, no, you think she auditioned for Cordelia's role?
I think so.
Okay.
I'm sure it's realistically, we make something of that. I think they just audition for all the roles that are half fit in their
type, I mean, if you're a casting director and you're you have someone come in front of you and they're like, I'm reading for this role, you're not like, oh, well, you're right for that role, so you can't have this other one, which you would be way more suited to. Cool. Is there anything else you want to talk about the episode? It's it's a pretty light episode. Not too much to it.
Well, I think we've covered literally everything that happened in the episode. And yeah, I suppose the only other kind of significant set piece is, Graham at the ending trying to entice Riley to come back to the initiative, and the concept of, you used to be a guy with a mission, now you're the mission's boyfriend, and that he could have more of a purpose with the initiative, which, and maybe this is just what my makeup is like. My initial thought was how would you not find purpose in supporting the chosen one? You are contributing so specifically to averting the apocalypse if you are on the team, but some people I think need to be.
Well, that's, I think, one of the feminist notes of the show is that Buffy's partners consistently try to make decisions for her about what way her relationship should be, and Angel and what's his name, Riley, both break up with her because they think that she needs something else, basically, and she's like, what the fuck, I have not said that.
Because I was thinking about this reason, because I have, as many people have, I've daydreamed about being in the Scoobies and all that kind of stuff.
I never have done that one, actually.
Really?
No.
Just X-Men?
Mainly X-Men. X-Men is such a rich, like, serotonin rich environment in my brain that like I'm just like need to like, you know, sit there and just like let my eyes unfocus and suddenly I'm in.
You're there.
Yeah, I'm in
X-Land.
No, it's Westchester. Is that right?
Westchester. Yeah,
it's one of the upstate New York places.
Yeah. But yeah, so when I imagine being in the Scoobies, I'm not thinking about being in the Slayer somehow. I'm not Jonathan. I'm like, I would be so happy in that situation to clear the way for her to do her job. I think that would be like, I'm contributing.
You're such a simp.
Well, I'm a modern, well adjusted man. But Riley's like, I need to be the hero. I need to be Captain Riley.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, I think it's a real major part of what's going on here is that Riley has issues being deferential to a woman, and like, you know, maybe you should learn to be deferential to a woman who, when she's the Slayer and when she's,
it's empirically proven that she is stronger and smarter, more needed than you,
and nicer.
Yeah. But no, I think that's everything for this episode, for this week.
Okay, talk to you later. Goodbye.
So would you like to give me any fashion notes you have, or any Buffy Bits or anything?
Buffy Bits. Yeah, you took my one about the last appearance of the old Sunnydale High School.
It's more of a Joel bit, I think, than a Brian bit.
Okay. And the other thing I have is Charlie Weber stars as Ben. He looks significantly better and lasts significantly longer on the TV show How to Get Away with Murder. He's one of the
he is.
He's one of the TAs, I want to say. Never really watched that very much, but like, honestly, if you watch one Shonda Rhimes TV show, you kind of watch them all. Like, I don't like her.
Okay, strong views.
I don't like her.
I think there's probably a crossover between people who like Joss Whedon shows and Shonda Rhimes shows.
It's possible. Scandal I was always tempted to get really into, and I never did, and I'm kind of fine with it. Even though, what's her name? Who plays Paris Geller, Joel? I can't remember who plays Paris Geller. I'm a bad person. But she's in both Scandal and How to Get Away with Murder. Anyway. Oh yeah, there's a really nice Hawthorne reference in this episode. Hawthorne, why can't I remember his first name? I can't remember anything in this episode. What's Hawthorne's first name? Nathaniel. Nathaniel Hawthorne, who most famously wrote The Scarlet Letter, which is kind of a slog, to be honest. I wouldn't recommend going out and reading it. Like early American literature, for the most part, unless it's Poe, is dull.
Yeah, in many ways, I think it is the kind of thing that
Mark Twain, actually, very, very readable.
There's the absolutely early American writers who are very compelling, but I think it has an inflated place in the canon by virtue of the fact of like, oh, it's the literature of the founding of America, whereas like,
totally agree.
You know, you can't buy a seat at the table.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a Hawthorne reference here where Riley says, like, sees two of the agents who've come with Graham, and he says Agents Goodman and Agent Brown. Young Goodman and Brown being a Hawthorne short story or novella. I can't remember. I have read it. It wasn't very interesting.
How long was it?
I read it in an anthology book that we used for college, which was like the Norton Anthology of American Literature, Volume 1. So those pages, they were like the thinnest pages of all time.
Gossamer thing. Ridiculous.
Yeah. And they were very long with very small text. So, you know, what might be like 50 pages in that book in a normal book would be like 3 times length sometimes. So I don't know how long it was.
Yeah, that would help judge whether it's a novella or not.
Yeah. So yeah, that was my Buffy Bits. Fashion wise, Willow is wearing the worst stripy jumper I've ever seen in this episode, and she at one point buttons it up all the way and looks just awful.
Her haircut is in between 2 haircuts, and I think it specifically unbalances her head.
Yeah, it doesn't look great.
I didn't enjoy.
Riley is wearing he's buttoning back. This show just loves any opportunity to get Mark Blugas topless, but he's buttoning up a really bad kind of country bumpkin check shirt, tartan shirt at one point during this episode, and just looks bad. And then at another point he's wearing a tank top, so that's good.
He's also playing basketball in his jeans.
He is.
Which, like there's such a limited amount of things you should do while wearing jeans. I feel like playing basketball or sleeping are two things you shouldn't do in jeans.
You love sleeping in your jeans, Joe.
No, I fall asleep wearing jeans. It's not the same. It's not intentional.
Okay. And then at the end of the episode, Spike is wearing a like black velvet with like patterned like floral.
It's like a Eurovision shirt.
Shirt, yeah. And I was like, you know what, Joel, that is? It's a very Ronan Hudson shirt.
It is. Specifically Ronan Hudson by way of Queen of the Damned, kind of.
Ronan Hudson's a good friend of ours who we were talking about a couple of episodes ago because he is big into Dracula and he gave us a lot of information about
Give us a Geiger tour of film.
Yeah, of your man's Dracula, whatever his name is. Francis Ford Coppola. Okay.
Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yeah.
That's what that film is.
I picked up that reference about Hawthorne from Why Buffy Matters by... And she also notes that Riley Finn is probably a reference to Huckleberry Finn.
Yeah.
So another classic literature, or classic American literature reference there. Okay. Rating. No.
Death
count. How many deaths are there? Is it just the one?
It's two vamps dusted in their Spike, Riley, and Buffy's like group patrol.
Yeah.
At the start of the episode. That scene also made me think about how weird it is that because so many vampires are risen after they've been buried, and which would make sense. There's just a lot of vamps that are dusted wearing suits.
Yeah, it's so true.
Very specifically.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, and rating. What are you gonna give us?
I'd probably give it a 7.0 brain pennies. Nothing recommendable about the episode, but nothing wrong with it.
No.
Everyone was enjoyable to watch for the most part. I
found the voicing and the characterization was a little off. I thought the writer maybe didn't quite have a grasp of the characters as well as could have been the case. But certainly, yeah, go on.
Yeah, but that was it. And I suppose what brought it down a little bit for me is nothing against Riley. Obviously, very Riley-centric episode. It sidelined the rest of the Scooby Gang entirely for any measurable part except for Buffy and Riley. So that was whatever. Yeah. Yeah,
absolutely. I'd agree with that. I actually was thinking 7.0 as well. I'm going to give it 7.0 bread boxes out of 10.
That was a funny thing.
Yeah. So it's not really much to it. It's a keeping things ticking episode, and you're right, too much focus on Riley. The stuff with Buffy, baby, like just being very strong and very determined, was good though. Okay, should we move on to the Cordelia chase?
Yeah, absolutely. So this week's episode on the Cordelia chase over on Angel, the series, was untouched. And which
is an episode which I sure remember.
Yeah, which was not written by but was directed by Joss Whedon, and it was actually quite interesting. I was surprised with it. So the basic premise being that Angel comes across a young woman who is attacked.
Cordelia sends him.
Yeah, Angel by way of his visions from the powers that be through Cordelia comes across a young woman who is attacked by two rapists or would-be rapists in an alley, and she uses her telekinetic powers to crush them with a dumpster. That's a thing, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And he tries to track her down, and she accidentally impales him with a metal rod, and he shows her that he can't be killed by her, or lies and claims he can't be killed by her, and tries to help her. And we kind of unfold over the course of the episode that she is kind of genuinely a telekinetic, and she was found by Lila on behalf of Wolfram Hart in the Bible Belt and brought to LA because she wants to develop her into an assassin, but Lila has kind of made her feel like she is helping her and kind of her friend in the big city, etc., etc. And the gang are kind of dealing with how to contain her because she is very telekinetically powerful, and kind of unpacking that, as with many conjectural kind of telekinetic stories, that she developed her powers as a young girl because she was abused by her father, and that was the emotional trigger that kind of released this psychic energy.
A lot of carry energy to it.
Absolutely. And part of what falls into that as well was bringing Gung firmly into the team, and he's now kind of a paid member of Team Angle. And in the background, more Darla stuff. as she's continuing to invade his dreams. So a couple of things I'll say about it and why I liked it as an episode. One is there's a lot of conversation in the episode about how she was abused by her father, how she's kind of sexually conflicted, I think is the word I'm looking for there, and has various kind of psychological damage and trauma around it, how it informs both her powers and her actions in terms of her now trying to seduce Angel because she thinks that that's what men want from me, and I just kind of, basically she describes dissociating while they kind of get on top of her and all this kind of stuff. And it culminates in what I think is a complete wildcard move from Hart's part, bringing her father to the hotel as an endgame move to trigger her. And when he does come to the hotel, she destroys like the 2 floors of the building with her psychic blast, and then
yeets him
out the window. Angel says, "You have the power to finish it, do it." She throws him out the window, stops him before he hits the ground, and basically shows him that he has no power over her. So I think that given the highly sensitive and highly provocative subject matter, it actually wasn't handled bad at all. I actually don't think for whatever, for it being a broad story as many Monster Week stories are, there was nothing in it that made my ears perk up with the Kill Bill siren. There was no poor language used, there was no blaming, there was nothing like that. It was all fairly integrated, and I actually think that the angle of the story where Angel sees her, being a vampire is 250 years old and a force for good, sees her as a damsel in distress and someone to be saved, and then Cordelia having a separate conversation with her being like, you don't understand how much he is not about trying to manipulate you, but I see that you're potentially dangerous, and I see you're not that you're dirty or anything, but you know what you're doing, you know what's going on here, and you have some responsibility for your behavior as well. I thought that was actually fairly nuanced, to be honest. And kind of compelling. There's some random data points in the episode where obviously bringing Gung into it, he comes along with an axe that some kids made for him in camp, which is made out of a car hubcap, which becomes like his weapon for like the next few seasons. We see Lila's amazing apartment, and she gets a touch of a flavour of that she's also from like a poor background and made her way up, which I think like that is like, if there's anything like that's Lindsay's thing, and leave him to it. We see a flashback to what is ostensibly portrayed as the scene where Angel kills the gypsy girl that loses him his soul from a different angle. And Cordelia has some great action by herself in terms of helping out with the girl. Bethany is the girl's name. And then a really weird scene where which I actually thought someone was being possessed, or there was like some role play going on or something, but Wesley just deduces that she was probably abused by her father and then provokes her with this guess to try and do something. I'm not sure what it is.
It was really weird.
To prove the point, really. But I think that interacts interestingly with the fact that it's widely, I think, understood, if not confirmed, that Wesley was abused by his father and was like a very, very, very difficult childhood.
There's like it was really weird. It was like he was trying to provoke her by being like, "Oh, you were sexually abused by your father," and it's like, well, isn't that the basis on which to be kind to someone rather than mean? He's
trying to prove that this is what happened because knowing, his ideas of knowing will allow them to help her more specifically. But I feel like that scene was written as, wouldn't it be cool if something set Carrie off?
Yeah.
And he does this without necessarily motivation. But like Cordelia calls back to the fact that she was impaled when she was in Sunnydale. And it describes how she really relates that she knows Angel very well. So it felt very cohesive, I thought, as an episode in the Buffy universe. And there's some thematic, I think, overlap there with Angel's having a lot of dreams about Darla, and Spike was also having dreams about Buffy, and if you're watching these back to back, I think they hang together pretty well. So I would probably, I think if this episode of Buffy was a 7, I think I'd probably give this an 8 failed feminist gestures.
Okay, I'm gonna go with 7 failed feminist gestures. I wasn't quite as taken with it, but I thought it was absolutely serviceable.
I find that I think the comparison is often a thing for me as well, but 7, I often start at 10 and go down to 7 because like, here's the points I lose for it, where for this I'm like, there's actually a lot of things I liked about it, so that's kind of brought it up to an 8. And obviously I don't have any half integers I can give, so
true. Okay, should we wrap it up there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's going to be it for us this week on Buffy Boys. dying to go and cut into my sourdough and make sure it's not full of spiders. So if you
it's out of the hollow, so maybe the spiders go in there and eat all the stuff inside.
Absolutely, could be. So if you like this episode, please let us know. We always appreciate it. You can tell us, you can tell your friends, you can tell the extraordinarily competent military neurosurgeons in your life. Otherwise, stay safe, stay well, stay happy, stay slaying. And other outro information which I will give you as I finish this episode of
Buffy Boys.
See ya.
This ASMR is for Eva. Eva, no one likes you. Goodbye. Oops.